All right, thank you for joining us for the 7 Secrets of Effective Farmers webinar series, Labor Management. We're grateful to have Dr. Charley Martinez from University of Tennessee joining us as today's instructor. A few housekeeping items. Please leave your microphones on mute and video off during the session. If you like to locate a chat box, please type your name and location into the box to help me record attendance. You may use it at any time during the session to submit a question. I am recording the session and plan to post it online, so if you can share with someone else or you can just view it again. And I will ask you to answer 2 questions at the end of the session to record your feedbacks. If there are no questions at this time, let's dive into today's session.
Thank you, Iris. As she said, I'm Charley Martinez. I'm an assistant professor at UT and then an extension economist with UT Extension, specializing in farm and financial management. So as we move into the topic today, let me see if make sure my little arrows work. Sometimes they don't work on this Zoom. Here we go. So today's topic is labor management. In general, that's a really broad topic that can be tortured and pulled and talked about in all kind of which ways. And so the way I'm going to come out about it today is more from a principle standpoint and cover some topics and kind of talk about it from a general sense and kind of pin down certain things about Tennessee and some common issues and solutions that arise here in the state, but also around the country. And maybe at the end we can have some discussion, and if there's questions, I'll be happy to answer those. But hopefully the discussion part will be the best, because I think personal experience is the best way of learning, and especially if you're a new beginner, if you're a beginning farmer, or if you're one that's been around agriculture all your life, hearing about how people handle situations, I think is better than any book that or any PowerPoint that you can see or read. So let's just jump straight into Tennessee, and I'll give you some stats, and this comes from the census. So from 97 to 2017. Just in general, labor is a cost in the operating or the cost structure of a business. And so if we just think about as a state, where do we sit in terms of how much money we're paying or how much is it costing us from an operating standpoint? We have 2 different categories. We have contract labor and hired labor. And as you can see there in the red line, contract labor over time has not really been variable. Doesn't really change very much. The trend is pretty constant. But then if you look at the hired category, we see from 97 all the way down to 2012, we had a downward trend in terms of the cost structure not being really affected and also decreasing in terms of the cost of labor. But between 2012 and 2017, we had a drastic jump, and we're actually back up to right around 9% in terms of the operating expenses of labor for people that are hiring workers here in Tennessee. So if we've had a downward trend between 1997 and 2012, but then we've had a drastic increase between 2012 and 2017, is that a function of us paying more money, or what kind of is the underlying issue in the ag industry? And keep in mind, this is across all sectors of the ag industry in Tennessee. Go this way, there we go. So then we look at it, the expense measured in just total dollars, and on the column there I have it in thousands, so this is quite a bit of money. On the contract side of things, we do have an increasing trend there, but not necessarily as variable or as volatile as we see with the hired side. On the hired side of the labor, we see that between 1997 and 2002, we still had the same kind of trend that we saw on the contract side of things, but the rate of increase versus the contracted side is dramatically different. As you can see, between 2002 and 2017, we've actually been paying quite a bit of money in terms of hired labor, even though as in the cost structure, it was actually decreasing between 97 and 2012. We were still on trend and had a constant trend of paying a lot more money. And just from a starting point of 1997, we were just under 200 million, and now look at us now where we are. We almost doubled it. And so if you think about that, that's actually we've actually been decreasing and then increased, but still we're still paying around the same amount of money per year, or adding more money per year during this time frame. And so the question is that I had looking at it was, why, if we're paying out more money and the cost structure is different, is it just because we're paying for more employees in the state, or what's the underlying issue of that? And so I went and pulled more data, and I looked at it, and actually from 2002 to 2017, we've actually dropped 13,000 workers, number of hired workers in the state. But at the same time, we've had the number of operations decrease. And so we've had fewer workers throughout these years. So we've been paying a lot more money throughout the state with fewer workers. And so is that a function of the fewer farms? Well, of course, we've had some farms get out, the ag sector. We've had some consolidations. But even though the number of hired workers has decreased, the expense has gone up in terms of the percentages of expenses, if we remember that first chart. So that signals to me that as a state and as an industry or as an ag sector, that managers and owners or whoever is actually paying the bills has realized that they needed to spend more money in order to get people to operate whatever enterprise they were doing, whether it's fruits and vegetables or the cattle operation or row crop. As a state, we realized that we still needed to pay more money, even though we were paying fewer workers. And so kind of getting to the principles of things, I kind of just wanted to jump at it as three broad topics of availability, accountability, and sustainability in terms of maintaining a solid labor workforce, no matter what kind of either industry you're in, no matter what sector of the ag industry you are, no matter the size of your operation. I think all three of these principles can apply to what you're trying to do. And then I kind of went back and I talked to the Tennessee Department of Ag, or the Tennessee Department of Labor, and I asked them, I said, what constitutes an employee here, or at what point does a person become liable for their employees? And in the handbook on page 23, it has on there that it's 20,000 if an employee is making 20,000 per year, or if the employer employs 10 or more employees, that's when they become liable and considered to have the labor liability. And so if we just keep that in mind as we walk through that, we're talking about the ones that are actually hired, that are full-time employees, but knowing that we can't all afford these type of employees, or we can't all pay 20,000 per person, or we can't employ 10 or more employees, there's ways to be creative and try to think about still getting labor inside your enterprise or your farm or whatever your operation is. And we'll kind of talk about those as we move through. And so I think in terms of availability, as employees or as employers and owners and operators, we have to realize that not every person can do everything. We were talking before the call about the slaughtering plants and stuff of that nature, and I have that down there, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But if we think about just a simple tractor on a row crop operation, it could be a simple tractor that was around in the early 2000s, or it could be these new rocket ship looking things inside where there's lever, there's lights, there's computers everywhere, and it looks like, if you push one thing wrong, you're going to break the whole thing. And so with those type of operations, we would need to have a person that is either capable of learning how to operate that system, or someone that already knows it. And the cost of those at the beginning is going to vary. And as a person that's going to employ them, you have to make the decision, do you want to pay a little bit more to get the person that knows how to operate that system? Or do you want to hire somebody that doesn't know it, but you feel like can learn it and become educated on the system? That's a decision that on a per person or a per owner basis, you'll have to make. And then as you get larger, nowadays, I'll reference a cattle operation, for instance, a large cattle operation. A ranch manager back in probably about 50, 60 years ago, they would be doing the daily operations with the cowboys, whether it's, checking fence or, vaccinating calves or doing whatever. But nowadays, ranch managers are finding themselves behind the desk and learning about markets, keeping up with markets, keeping up with news, and then operating from afar. They're on the walkie-talkie more, they're on the phones more. They try to keep up what's happening out on the ranch. And so there comes a level of education that could be needed for your operation. Say, if you know that you don't know how to do it, but you can afford someone that is educated enough to do it, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of say, well, I just don't need someone all the time, but I need someone temporarily. So we'll think of it from a temp side of things. H-2A program is a good opportunity or a good program to find temporary agriculture help. Of course, during a pandemic, it's been a hot topic within the industries of fruits and vegetables and nuts. And so they come with their own set of laws and show you, if you hire H-2A people, you got to be sure to understand the laws and how the program works in terms of applying, what happens while you have employees, what do you need to offer while the employees are with you, and stuff of that nature. And that's just a per operation basis. Another kind of growing thing would be interns, whether it be from the high school level, the college level, anything in between. That's become a pretty good temporary solution. I was a product of, I did 3 internships with 2 feed yards, and one of the internships was solely paid by my college for me to go. The other 2 were a combination of the college paying for me to go and also the employer paying me to go. I had one where I had insurance from the company, and then I have one where the insurance was covered by my school. And so it's always going to depend, but say you can't afford or you don't really feel like you need to hire expensive employees, there's other ways around it to try to lower your cost, but still getting quality labor. In terms of interns, the bigger you are and you hire an intern, you're kind of hoping that they might come back and join you down the road, or at least at the minimum, they'll be able to really help you in terms of being efficient and getting a quality worker. And so when I kind of put the slaughter plant example here, because a hot topic right now in Tennessee is, I would like to process my own animals, or I would like to open a facility to process animals to sell meat at retail. And a classic example of an issue is here in Tennessee, there's not really a school or a program that is offering or teaching students or teaching people how to process animals, and therefore the availability of people to come in immediately and being able to split an animal, split a carcass, carve out steaks, debone an animal, process it to the point where you can vacuum package and you understand the size of things. That's not really available here. And so we would either have to teach people here in Tennessee how to do that for themselves, or teach their employees how to do that, or a manager or an owner of a packing plant would have to go out and try to find someone that could help and become a manager for them to operate that facility. I put here, this is an up-to-date job listing. Whenever you're recruiting, be explicit as possible. This is just a snapshot of how this took up a whole 2 pages of my web browser. And they were real explicit about what they were hoping to find in a ranch manager. So when you're recruiting, just make sure you're explicit, or if you're in hiring, be explicit as to what your need. So that way you can make sure you're checking all the availability boxes in your head. We get to accountability. I think that's the next biggest thing. I have up there, show up every day. They got to be trustworthy. They have to be dependable. I think you can interchange those 3 bullet points with accountability, but I like accountability because to me it kind of incorporates all 3 together. But for instance, if we hire a person that is working on an operation, you got to be sure that you got to trust that they're going to be there every day, no matter rain, sleet, or snow. Agriculture is open every day, and so the weather you're at the mercy of the weather every day. Also, when I was at one of the feed yards that I was at on Saturdays, is always the day of the week that we have the fewest amount of employees on the yard. And that's usually when like the husbands that have families, or if there's a husband that wants to take their family out for a vacation, they're going to go on the weekend. Well, as an intern, I'm low man on the totem pole, and I got to be there on Saturdays. And so we show up and we have our horses saddled up. We're ready to go out and check pins. And this is at 4 a.m. in the morning. And there's 3 of us there waiting on one more person. And we're sitting there for 30 minutes looking at each other, trying to, what gives, where's so-and-so? Well, after 30 minutes, we're like, if we wait any longer, by the time we get done, it's going to be too hot. We need to hurry up and get done. And so we go do our thing. We come back for lunch, and we get a call from the manager that so-and-so went out on a Friday night, got in trouble by the law, and ended up in jail, and that's why he's not working. And it was like, well, okay. Long story short, to that person, I never saw that person work on the feed yard ever again, because I'm pretty sure they got fired that day. But simple things like that, it makes a difference in terms of one person missing can make a big issue. And I think one of the key things in terms of managing labor is if you're the boss, I think the employees should expect the same from you as the owner or the manager, or if you're the person signing the checks and everything. Because if you show that you care about the business, I think that goes a long way internally with the employee or socially with the employee of saying, if they care about it, I care about it. If they don't care about it, I don't care about it, because it's not important to them. Why should it be important to me? And I think sometimes as managers or owners, I think that gets lost because, we all have a life outside of the business, and some people, the business is their life. And, there's a give and take there between the employees and the managers. And I think sometimes that gets lost. I grew up working for my dad, and the way I was treated as an employee was different than the other employees. But nonetheless, I still knew that what I was doing for my dad was important to him. So I tried to give him all every time, not just because he was my dad, but because he was my manager. And so I think understanding that it's a two-way street with your employees is just as important for any manager. And so then we get to sustainable. If we have available employees or available labor, we hire them, and we know that they're great employees and we love having them, and they're willing to do anything and everything, no questions asked. Can we be sustainable in that sense? Sometimes your best employee has an opportunity to go work for in another field like construction. I know of a guy that was at a ranch, really good welder, top notch. Well, he got a job offer from the local city there, municipal, just to go be the welder for the city, and that's what he did. And he made a lot more money doing that than being a cowboy. Even though he loved it, he realized that it was more of a benefit for him and his family. And so that's one issue. Another issue is there's a saying that the last of a dying breed. I think that holds true in agriculture in terms of labor, because sometimes we have the best cowboy or the best mechanic in our row crop garage or whatever, or we have someone that just really understands the nature and the philosophy of growing strawberries or some kind of fruit or vegetable or something, and they just simply get to the point where they need to retire. They want to do something else, and you lose that asset of an employee. That creates an issue in terms of sustainability. And then, of course, right now during a pandemic, the common topic that was talked about was we have jobs, but no one wants to come to work because the unemployment benefits are too good right now, and I can't compete with that because I can't pay that. And so, during times of something like that, that's risk that we'll have to learn how to manage as managers and owners of an enterprise, that we know that this is possible again in the future. We got to learn from it. This was a black swan event, but we have to learn how to make basically a plan. If this was to happen again, how would we handle it? The packing plants have learned and made a protocol of how they're going to handle a pandemic again in the future based off of this. And so I think if we take that same philosophy and we go down to the small producers, and you got to have a protocol of what can happen or what you will do if it happens and how you're going to handle it, I think that would be really, really smart moving forward. So growing up in Texas, there was always like an ag workers insurance company or a private company. And so when I came here, one of the issues that was talked about was, insurance and workers' comp. And I called the Tennessee Department of Labor, and I kind of asked questions here, and because they post the workers' comp rates and everything. And what I was directed and told was that there are private entities within the state, such as Hartford or Liberty, that offer insurance packages for employers, but it's all based upon that caveat that I said at the beginning about $20,000 per employee or 10 or more employees. And so it gets sticky, and there's not like a one blanket answer for that for our producers here in Tennessee. It would be more on a producer or an owner type basis, according to the folks that I talk to. And so, if you look at, I know like Ohio, California, Washington, it's handled by the state. Here in Tennessee, I was directed that sometimes, more than not, it's going to be a federal issue. And so just kind of keep that in mind as you start thinking about, okay, do I need to develop a benefit package for an employee? You got to be careful and understand what's happening in terms of liability. And so some solutions moving forward for maintaining a really good labor force or a workforce is, I think people forget to know what type of style they have as a manager and owner. Are you the type of manager? Are they the type of manager that micromanages everything? Are they the type of manager that once they hire someone, they just let them do their thing? So like I micromanage, I think of Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys. He's got to be in everybody's business in terms of what happens in the daily operations of the business. And maybe that's why they haven't won a Super Bowl. And then you have somebody, you can have somebody that lets go of the reins and just says, look, I hired them. They're going to do their thing, just like the Patriots owner. He hired Bill Belichick, and Bill Belichick has full reign as to what happens. And so you could be someone in the middle and as a manager, and you got to figure out the best way to handle your employees. How do I know what kind of manager I am? There I listed two different types of tests or like personality tests. There's a simple one, a free one called a color test. And then there's a full, one called a 360 where it's a very in-depth, you pay a lot of money to get more knowledge about quote unquote what people think of you and how you can start using that for your to your advantage in terms of managing style. And I think I mentioned it earlier in terms of recruiting, but in terms of whenever you're searching for employees or if you're recruiting employees, be transparent as possible, be responsibility specific. One of the things like coming here to work at Tennessee was I knew exactly what was expected of me. I knew exactly how I was going to be graded, and it makes it easy for me to know where I stand with the university. And I appreciate that because knowing, well, am I doing this correctly? Am I supposed to be doing this? Things of that nature are not in my head when I'm doing my job. And so I think even if you're a producer, it's, hey, we need you to make sure that there's a 95% cabinet rate or something to that extent. Be specific. That's always a good starting point for employees whenever they're wondering if they want to work for you. And I think something that's often also kind of not talked about enough is that when you employ somebody or people, I think you got to continuously work to understand your employees. Everybody likes bonuses, myself included. I love bonuses. But besides bonuses, it's if the Cowboys lose on Sunday, my friends know that I'm not going to be in a good mood on Monday morning. I mean, I know some folks here that are diehard Tennessee fans. If Tennessee loses on Saturday, guarantee it, church is not that fun on Sunday. And so it's just things like that. You got to know how your employee is going to respond and kind of who they are. And little things like birthdays and family events, knowing that, hey, happy anniversary to you and your wife, or happy birthday to your son, or happy birthday to you. That's something to think about. Big deal that I've seen with whether you're a corporate in Cargill or if you're a small town rancher, inviting the employees to just an event, maybe it's like Christmas or something like that. That really makes them feel involved and feel loved by the company or the producer or the owner or the rancher. And I think that helps stabilize and maintain a good relationship. Another thing that I think is pretty cool, especially if you're a large enterprise, would be awards and recognition. Even if you're a small producer, say, hey, thank you for doing great and doing this. And here, I understand and I recognize that you've been doing well for me. Let me reward you because you've really been working hard for me. Maybe it's an extra day off or something. Little things like that make a big difference. And then I found some creative solutions besides insurances that in the ag industry specifically, I know have helped some employers keep employees. This comes off of that job posting that I had I guess it was the fourth or fifth slide or whatever, talking about the ranch management job that was in Nebraska. But here we have the estimated salary. Base wage is negotiable depending on experience. Benefits include health insurance for the family. HSA, I'm not really too sure what that is, but house and utilities, generous retirement plan. But the creative one that they came up with was a cow revenue sharing agreement, a bonus plan, and beef. So not only are you gonna, you're working on the cattle ranch, or they're saying basically that we're gonna hire somebody that's the manager of the cattle ranch. and they're working hard. And not only when we sell these animals do I get money, but you're going to get money also. We're going to share on the revenue. And then if we are processing animals, you're going to get some of the beef also. So like little tangible things like that go a long way. And I've seen people on the crop side of things section off some acres for employees, and they'll say, hey, you can use our equipment and you can buy seeds or whatever, and we won't charge you any rent on land, and you can farm, 10, 20 acres or whatever, and whatever comes off, that's your money, and you can have that. And I think that was pretty cool. Also, hire multiple people from a family, even if it's something simple as hiring a kid to do barn help or to, clean up the pens or whatever, or clean the tractors. I've seen it whenever, me personally with my family, we have a dad and a son that work for us, and because they both work for us, they hold each other accountable, but also they like to go to work with people they know, and they can, they get home and they talk about work or whatever. But for us, it just makes sure that it gives us some satisfaction knowing that they like coming to work with people that's their own family, and that's just kind of an unnoticed benefit of that. So kind of covered broad topics and kind of reminders in terms of if you never really managed people before, kind of some things that you could do, and if you're having issues, maybe some of the things I mentioned could be beneficial for you. And like I said, I was hoping to get through this within 30 minutes, and I did that because I wanted to hope there was some type of discussion, or if there's questions. And I don't want to be that person that takes up every split second of a presentation and leaves nothing for everybody else. So if there's any questions or discussions, I will quit sharing my screen, and we'll see if I can.
Thanks, Charlie. Do we have any questions for Charlie on labor management? Yeah, labor issue just has been a really, big issue in ag in general. I see Mark, do you have a question?
I do. Again, as we were discussing before the recording started, I'm just getting ready to start out. I'm thinking an intern or a contractor initially. At what point do you think you make that transition from an intern or a contractor to a full-time employee? What kind of things do you think about to make that decision?
So with anything, so labor is technically an asset, right? And so the key thing, and if you go to economics, classic economics, it's marginal benefit to marginal cost. And if you have, like, if you're using a contractor, or if you're using interns and you're paying X amount of dollars, but you think that you're getting a marginal benefit, or if they're producing enough to where you're happy, I really wouldn't see a reason why you should hire a full-time employee. But say you're thinking, well, if I hire a full-time employee, I get an extra benefit out of it, then it would be worth it. It would just be a matter of kind of what would be the added benefit of hiring a full-time employee versus not having them, because, as you hire a full-time employee, you inherit a little bit more risk. And so it would be kind of the marginal benefit to a marginal gain. Is it worth it? If I bring on this risk and I have to pay a little bit extra, do I get a little bit more productivity or consistency out of what I need out of the labor? Does that make sense?
It does. Thanks.
We have another question in the chat box, Charlie. Cynthia commented labor is really difficult. What should be the startup pay?
Is that like dollars per hour for a new employee, or?
I believe so.
Okay. Well, so I was trying to look up here in Tennessee. So Tennessee, on the USDA surveys and census, it's not really, it's not a hot state where they keep up with that. And so I calculated it, and I had it out to $17 backwards. And when I just took, okay, I know how many we have, I know how much money we spend, how much is that if I just said 40 hours a week. But I would also think it depends upon the industry, because say in cattle world, you get hired by the job or by the week, not necessarily by the hour, because things fluctuate all the time, right? And so you might give, 8 hours one day and then have to do 12 hours the next day. And so they just kind of give you a flat base pay. And I think it would depend upon your industry. If you're like a row cropper versus a livestock person versus the fruit and vegetable people, because each one is going to have different needs. I would think also, if you know people that are in the business, figuring out what other people are paying. Say if I knew Kevin Ferguson he needed a ranch hand and he called me, or if I needed one and I called Kevin and say, hey, how much are you paying a ranch hand, or how much have you heard? Then you can kind of just bounce it off that way, because you also don't want to pay someone different. Is there a benefit of having interns live on property? I think that's a good question. I think that's also a legal question, because I've seen it to where a producer had interns on their property and didn't charge them for rent or anything, but they also paid them really cheap and didn't really benefit the intern. And so the intern left, found their own place. I would think it's a legal issue in terms of what happens if they get hurt, what happens if they're sick or something like that. I think it becomes you'd have to iron that out on a contract. I did not take housing with Cargill because I got paid more per hour to not live on the facility or on the property. And I could find cheap housing around there. And I guess another benefit would be if you have immediate help if they're on the property. So that's one of the big benefits of having interns on the property. If something happens, they're there. Hey, I forgot to shut off the water. Can you go shut it off for me? Yeah. Instead of leaving it on all night, for instance.
Any other questions?
No problem.
We have a really small group today for this session. It's just getting to the end of the webinar, really, and we don't have as much participation. And plus the pandemic, really, a lot of webinars, a lot of Zoom meetings. I have a lot of competition.
There's a law of diminishing returns with Zoom meetings. Each one becomes less and less fun.
Any other questions for Charlie?
Oh yeah, I forgot about the Small Farm Expo. That's true. I have a question about developing. Go ahead, Kiera.
I realize my question is pretty long. This is Kiera Gooseby talking. So I have a question about trainings. If there aren't any trainings in the area, do you have experience knowing what should be included in a training? So I understand that there's, basic, whatever we want them to know, but is there like a certification or a program that we can implement that they'll walk away feeling like they learned something and like it's useful for them long term?
So I'm taking it as, what are some checklist things that an intern needs to understand or get from their experience? Is that regardless of the industry?
Yes. And are you familiar with any training programs that are virtual that we can offer to new interns and new hires to help them? So I'm in vegetable production. And so
I don't know of any, and myself and Dr. Margarita Valencia, we actually submitted a grant for small producers like vegetable and fruit type producers, that we would help develop a internship program here at the university, to where they would learn like simple things like management techniques of strawberries, for instance, and they would actually be prepped and ready to go for a producer to take. Okay, here's an intern that you can take, and they can get real world experience outside of what they've learned in our training. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
But I don't know of any online type things. And I'm thinking back to my internship experiences. I kind of knew what I wanted to learn. For instance, with Cargill, I wanted to learn how they hedged and how they marketed their animals. And so up front, I told the manager, hey, this is what I really want to learn. Can you teach me? And they brought me in in the meetings. I learned, got to ask questions. And I think the more transparent you are, or as someone is with an intern, of saying, what do you want to learn, and trying to match that to what they would like to do, I think that's the biggest way to make an internship successful, or an intern feel like they've had success learning what they really wanted to learn, not necessarily like for me, if I went to the feed yard and all I did was clean the water troughs in the pens, I would have felt like that was a waste of my time. So I think being upfront, just asking, what do you want to learn, is the best way to do that, to make sure it's quote unquote successful.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And we have so many ag agents right here. I'm not exactly sure, Kiara, I'm not sure if you heard of Good Agricultural Practices, GAP. Rachel or Larry, I'm not sure if you heard of anything like, do they offer online employee training?
So I have heard of GAP. They do offer online employee training. And they also have something called ServeSafe, which is helpful for students to learn as well. But GAP is a good one for getting the farm certified, as well as interns and anyone that works on the property. It's a good one to have.
See, and that was the issue that we were trying to address with the grant was, for a producer that says, I want an intern, but I have no idea what it takes to get an intern. The deal was, we were like, we'd have to at least have a minimum of, you need to have X amount of beds and X amount of stipend available to pay for the intern, and then have it ready from that standpoint. But we'll see if we get funded for it. Not sure yet. It's still not been said yes or no if it get funded.
And another training, I guess, is just farm safety training for any employee or interns that there are some opportunities out there as well, I believe. Any other questions? There's some good discussion right here. All right, just before you all leave, I got 2 questions for you to answer. Just help me record the feedbacks right here. And thank you for participating our 7 Secrets of Effective Farmers webinar series today, labor management. And next month, we'll have our last session of the year on succession planning. So hopefully you're all gonna join us next month. And thank you, Charlie, again.
Yep, no problem.